Deep in the Colorado mountains, where civilization ends and wilderness begins, Maya had carved out her sanctuary in an abandoned mine shaft. For 6 months, she'd survived on rainwater, foraged berries, and the desperate hope that no one would find her. Her swollen belly pressed against her makeshift bed of pine needles as another contraction rippled through her body. The baby was coming early. She wasn't just any runaway. Maya Rodriguez was a former DEA agent who disappeared after discovering her partner was selling information to the cartel she'd spent 3 years infiltrating. The same cartel that had put $1 million bounty on her head. The same cartel whose leader had fathered the child she now carried. The rumble of a Harley echoed off the canyon walls, growing louder with each passing second. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as heavy boots approached her hidden entrance. Through the shadows she recognized the leather jacket, the silver skull ring, the scar above his left eyebrow. Jake Morrison, her dead partner's brother, the Hell's Angel she'd loved and betrayed 5 years ago. But why was he here now? And whose side was he really on? Maya pressed herself deeper into the cave's darkness, one hand instinctively protecting her belly while the other gripped the Glock she'd managed to keep through 6 months of hell. Her breathing came in short, painful gasps as another contraction seized her. The baby wasn't waiting for a convenient moment. The footsteps stopped just outside the carefully concealed entrance she'd camouflaged with brush and fallen logs. She could hear him breathing, could almost feel his presence like an electric charge in the mountain air. 5 years hadn't dulled her awareness of him one bit. Maya. His voice was exactly as she remembered, rough velvet over broken glass. "I know you're in there." Her finger tightened on the trigger. Jake Morrison had every reason to hate her. When she'd gone undercover with the DEA, she'd used him, manipulated his feelings to get closer to his MC's connections with the drug trade. She'd gathered intelligence on his club, his brothers, his family. And when it all went to hell, she'd disappeared without a word, leaving him to face the consequences of her deception. "I'm not here to hurt you," he continued, his voice carrying that same quiet authority that had always made her pulse quicken. "But you're gonna bleed out in there if you don't let me help." Maya's breath caught. How could he possibly know about the baby, about her condition? Another contraction hit, stronger this time, and she couldn't suppress the soft cry that escaped her lips. The sound echoed off the cave walls, betraying her position completely. "Christ, Maya!" The urgency in his voice was unmistakable. "How long have you been in labor?" She wanted to tell him to leave, to pretend she wasn't here, to protect the fragile safety she'd built in this cold, lonely place. But another wave of pain crashed through her, and she realized with crystal clarity that she was going to die here alone if she didn't accept help. The baby would die too. "Since dawn," she called out, her voice weaker than she'd intended. The sound of brush being cleared away filled the air, and then Jake's broad silhouette blocked the pale afternoon light filtering into the cave entrance. He had to duck to fit through the opening, and when he straightened inside the mine shaft, Maya was struck by how much he'd changed. The boyish features she remembered had hardened into something more dangerous, more weathered. Prison had left its mark on him. She could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way his eyes constantly scanned for threats. He'd done 2 years because of her operation, because she'd loved him and used him and destroyed everything they'd built together. "Jesus," he breathed, taking in her makeshift shelter, her gaunt appearance, the way her hands shook as she pointed the gun at his chest. "What have you done to yourself?" Staying alive, she managed between contractions. "What are you doing here, Jake? How did you find me?" He moved slowly, hands visible, the way someone approaches a wounded animal. "Your partner Tommy wasn't the only one selling information. The cartel's been hunting you for months, but so have other people. People who want to keep you breathing." "What people?" Jake's eyes met hers, and she saw something she hadn't expected. Not hatred or anger, but a fierce protectiveness that made her chest tighten with old emotions she couldn't afford to feel. "The kind of people who know that Carlos Mendoza's baby makes you the most valuable witness in federal custody," he said quietly. "The kind who've been tracking every cartel move to find you first." Maya's world tilted as another contraction hit, and she realized that her carefully constructed isolation had been an illusion. The storm she'd been hiding from had finally found her, and it was wearing a familiar face. The bell above the diner door chimed again, but Sarah didn't look up from her coffee cup. She'd made that mistake once already today, and her heart was still trying to find its normal rhythm. The steam rising from the dark liquid reminded her of the fog that had rolled in from the Pacific that morning 3 years ago, the last morning she'd seen Marcus alive. Or so she'd thought. Her hand instinctively moved to the slight curve of her belly, hidden beneath the oversized flannel shirt she'd taken to wearing. 18 weeks. The baby was the size of a bell pepper now, according to the pregnancy app she'd downloaded under yet another false name. She wondered if her child would inherit Marcus's green eyes or the stubborn set of his jaw that she remembered so well. "More coffee, hon?" The waitress appeared beside her table, pot in hand, wearing a smile that had seen too many long shifts. "Please." Sarah's voice came out steadier than she felt. She'd practiced that, keeping her voice level, unremarkable, forgettable. The diner's atmosphere buzzed with the usual afternoon crowd, truckers grabbing late lunches, a mother trying to corral 2 restless toddlers, an elderly man reading yesterday's newspaper. Normal people living normal lives. The kind of life she'd been desperately trying to build before everything went sideways again. The burner phone in her pocket vibrated once. A text. Sarah's blood turned to ice water as she read the message from an unknown number, still playing house in small towns. "You can't hide forever." Her fingers trembled as she deleted the message, but the words were already burned into her memory. They'd found her again. After 8 months of careful planning, of becoming Emma Richardson, of building a quiet life in Cedar Falls, Washington, they'd found her. She needed to move. Now. Sarah left a $10 bill on the table for a $4 meal and headed for the door, keeping her movements casual, despite the adrenaline screaming through her veins. The parking lot stretched before her, filled with pickup trucks and SUVs that belonged to people who had roots, who didn't check their rearview mirrors every 30 seconds. Her Honda Civic, reliable, common, invisible, sat in the far corner where she'd parked it. Always park where you can see the exits, always have a clear path out, rules she'd learned the hard way. "Sarah." The voice stopped her cold, 3 feet from her car. Deep, familiar, carrying the same note of barely contained intensity that used to make her pulse quicken for entirely different reasons. She turned slowly, her hand moving protectively over her stomach. Marcus stood beside a black pickup truck, and seeing him in daylight made the reality hit harder. He was real. He was here, and he was looking at her like she was a ghost, which, she supposed, was exactly what she was supposed to be. "Don't." The word came out sharper than she intended. "Don't say my name, not here." He took a step toward her, and she noticed the slight limp, the way he favored his left side. New scars traced along his forearm, disappearing beneath the rolled sleeves of his denim shirt, evidence of whatever hell he'd survived that night in Seattle when everything went wrong. "We need to talk." His eyes swept the parking lot with the same hypervigilance she recognized in herself. Old habits. "No, we don't." Sarah's hand was on her car door handle now. "You being here puts me in danger. It puts—" She stopped herself before she could say too much. But Marcus had always been too observant for his own good. His gaze dropped to where her hand rested protectively over her midsection, and she watched the realization dawn in those green eyes. "How long?" His voice was quieter now, rougher. "It doesn't matter." She pulled the door open, but his hand caught the frame, not trapping her but making his presence impossible to ignore. "Sarah, Emma, whoever you're calling yourself now, listen to me. Victor Kozlov is dead." The name hit her like a physical blow. Victor Kozlov, the man whose organization had torn her life apart, who'd put a price on her head that had sent her running across 3 states. Dead. "You're lying." "I watched him die." Marcus's voice carried a weight that spoke of terrible truths. "But his nephew has taken over operations, And he's not content to just find you anymore. He wants to make an example. Another car pulled into the lot, and Sarah's nerves screamed danger. Every instinct told her to run, but Marcus was still talking, his words cutting through her panic. They know about Cedar Falls. They know about Emma Richardson. And they know you're not running alone anymore. His eyes dropped to her belly again, and in them she saw something that terrified her more than any threat: hope. Get in the truck, Sarah. Let me help you disappear properly this time. The second burner phone buzzed, then the first, both at once. They were out of time. The rain had stopped, but Sarah's hands still trembled as she fumbled with her apartment keys. The narrow hallway of her building felt suffocating, shadows stretching like grasping fingers from every corner. She'd taken 3 different buses home, doubling back twice to ensure no one was following her. Old habits died hard, especially when those habits had kept her alive for the past 2 years. Inside her modest 1-bedroom apartment, she immediately went to the window and peered through the blinds at the street below. A few parked cars, an elderly woman walking her dog, nothing unusual. But Marcus's sudden appearance had shattered her carefully constructed sense of security. If he could find her, others could too. Her baby kicked, a sharp reminder of what she had to lose now. Sarah placed both hands on her rounded belly, whispering the same promise she'd made every day since learning she was pregnant: "I'll keep you safe, no matter what." The burner phone in her jacket pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Marcus's number was already programmed in, waiting. She'd memorized it years ago, back when they were partners in more than just the professional sense, back when she thought she knew who she could trust. 3 sharp knocks at her door made her freeze. Her building required a key card for entry. Visitors had to be buzzed up. The only people with access were residents and maintenance, but maintenance didn't work this late. "Sarah, it's me." Marcus's voice was low, urgent. "We need to talk." She approached the door silently, checking the deadbolt was secure. "How did you get up here?" "Same way I found you in the first place." "Can you open the door?" Standing in a hallway isn't exactly discreet. Every instinct screamed at her to stay put, to tell him to leave. But another part of her, the part that remembered how he'd once taken a bullet meant for her, wanted answers. She turned the deadbolt and opened the door just wide enough to see his face. Marcus looked tired, older than his 34 years. A thin scar ran along his left temple, new since she'd last seen him. His dark eyes, once warm when they looked at her, now held only professional concern. "5 minutes," she said, stepping back to let him enter. He moved into her living space, taking in the sparse furniture, the small kitchen, the careful anonymity of it all. His gaze lingered on her pregnant silhouette, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps even pain. "When?" he asked simply. 6 months. She didn't elaborate. "Couldn't. You said we needed to talk. About what?" Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from countless late-night stakeouts. Vincent Kellner was released from federal prison 3 days ago. The name hit her like a physical blow. Sarah gripped the back of her couch for support, her knees suddenly weak. Vincent Kellner, the man whose criminal empire she'd helped bring down, who'd sworn he'd make her pay for her betrayal. The reason she'd been running, hiding, living like a ghost. That's impossible. He was sentenced to 25 years. His lawyers found a technicality, evidence tampering allegations. Half the case got thrown out on appeal. Marcus's voice was grim. He walked out of minimum security yesterday morning. Sarah's mind raced. 3 days. Vincent had been free for 3 days, and Marcus was just telling her now. Why didn't anyone warn me? Where's my handler? Agent Morrison was supposed to... Morrison's dead, Sarah. The words landed like hammer blows. Car accident 2 weeks ago, brake failure, very convenient timing. The room spun around her. Agent Morrison had been her lifeline, her only contact with her old life. He'd helped her disappear, set up her new identity, promised she'd be safe if she stayed hidden. Now he was gone, and Vincent was free. There's more. Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping. Someone's been asking questions. putting money on the street for information about a pregnant woman matching your description. Vincent's not just free, he's actively hunting you. Sarah sank onto her couch, one hand protectively covering her belly. How long do I have? Hard to say. Your new identity is good, but not perfect. A week, maybe 2 if you're careful. Marcus knelt in front of her, his hands hovering near hers but not quite touching. Sarah, I can protect you, but you have to trust me. Trust. Such a simple word for something so complicated. She'd trusted Marcus once, completely and without reservation. Then she'd discovered the file hidden in his apartment, the one that suggested he'd known about Vincent's plan to eliminate her before she testified. She'd run that same night, never giving him a chance to explain. I trusted you before, she whispered. Look where it got me. I know you have questions about what happened, about what you found. But right now, those questions are a luxury you can't afford. His eyes were intense, desperate. Vincent's coming for you, Sarah. And when he finds you, he won't just kill you. He'll make you watch while he destroys everything you care about first. The sound of Maya's footsteps echoed through the empty parking garage as she clutched her ultrasound photos against her chest. 3 months. 3 months of careful anonymity, of building a new life in this quiet coastal town, and now everything was unraveling because of a chance encounter at a coffee shop. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with her car keys. The baby kicked, a gentle flutter that reminded her why she'd run in the first place. She had to protect this life growing inside her, even if it meant disappearing again. Maya, wait. The voice cut through the concrete silence like a blade. She froze, her back still turned to him, knowing that if she looked into those dark eyes again, her resolve would crumble completely. You can't just walk away, Ethan said, his footsteps approaching slowly as if she were a wounded animal he was afraid to startle. Not after everything. She turned around, keeping the ultrasound photos hidden. There is no everything, Ethan. There hasn't been for over a year. He looked different than she remembered, leaner, with new lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and hard choices. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by worn jeans and a simple black jacket. But those eyes, those impossibly dark eyes that had once made her believe in forever, remained unchanged. I looked for you, he said quietly. After Prague, after everything went to hell, I searched everywhere. You shouldn't have. The words came out sharper than she intended. I told you in my letter. Your letter was 3 lines, Maya. 3 lines after 2 years together. His voice carried a hurt that made her chest tighten. You disappeared without explanation, without giving me a chance to... To what? She stepped back, feeling the cold concrete wall against her shoulders. To fix it? Some things can't be fixed, Ethan. Some mistakes are too dangerous to undo. He studied her face with the intensity she remembered, the way he used to look at classified documents and crime scene photos, searching for hidden truths. You're scared, he said finally. Not of me, of something else. Maya's breath caught. He always could read her too well. It had been both a blessing and a curse when they were together, his ability to see through every wall she built to find the vulnerable woman hiding behind her carefully constructed facades. I'm not the same person you knew in Prague, she said, trying to inject steel into her voice. That Maya is gone. I don't believe that. He took another step closer, and she caught the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something new, coffee and ocean air. The Maya I knew was stronger than whatever scared her away. She fought for what mattered. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. The Maya you knew was naive enough to think love could overcome anything, that Maya got people killed. The words hung between them like a physical barrier. Ethan's expression shifted, confusion replacing the determination in his eyes. What are you talking about? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a text message. The number was blocked, but she didn't need to see the sender's name to know who it was from. Her blood turned to ice as she read the simple message, "Found you." Ethan noticed her sudden pallor. "Maya, what's wrong?" She looked past him toward the parking garage entrance, scanning for shadows that didn't belong, for the glint of surveillance equipment, for any sign that Vincent Kozlov's reach had finally found her again. The baby kicked harder, as if sensing her panic. "I have to go," she whispered, pushing past him toward her car. Ethan caught her arm gently but firmly. "Talk to me. Whatever's happening, whatever you're running from, let me help." For a moment, she almost did. Almost collapsed into his arms and told him everything. About Vincent, about the flash drive hidden in her apartment, about the child growing inside her that Vincent could never know existed. But then she remembered Prague, remembered the explosion that had killed 2 innocent operatives because she'd trusted the wrong person. "You can't help me," she said, pulling free from his grasp. "Nobody can. And if you're smart, you'll forget you saw me today. You'll leave this town and never look back." She reached her car and fumbled with the locks, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the keys. Behind her, Ethan stood motionless, watching her with an expression that broke her heart. "I can't forget you, Maya," he said softly. "I tried for a year, and I can't." She slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, not trusting herself to respond. As she pulled out of the parking space, she caught his reflection in her rearview mirror, a solitary figure in an empty garage, growing smaller with each passing second. But as she drove toward the exit, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. The rain hammered against the diner's windows as Sarah stared at the phone in her trembling hands. Marcus had been gone for 20 minutes, claiming he needed to make some calls about safe houses, but every second felt like an eternity. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her mounting anxiety. She'd memorized every detail of the cramped diner, the cracked vinyl booth seats, the flickering fluorescent light above the grill, the way the elderly waitress kept glancing nervously at the door. Sarah had chosen this place precisely because it had 3 exits and sat on a busy intersection, but now those same qualities made her wonder who else might find it convenient. The bell above the entrance chimed, and Sarah's heart lurched. A man in a dark coat stepped inside, water dripping from his shoulders. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with steel-grey hair that caught the harsh lighting. Not one of Dimitri's men, but something about his purposeful movements made Sarah's instincts scream danger. She slid lower in the booth, one hand instinctively moving to her belly. The man's eyes swept the diner methodically, the way someone searches when they're looking for a specific target. When his gaze found hers, she saw recognition flash across his weathered features. "Sarah Chen?" His voice was gravelly, professional. FBI, she realized with a sinking heart. Before she could respond, Marcus appeared behind the man like a shadow. "Agent Hawkins," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "You're early." Sarah's blood turned to ice. This meeting wasn't coincidental. Marcus had arranged it. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound, stealing her breath and making the diner spin around her. "Traffic was lighter than expected," Hawkins replied, settling into the booth across from Sarah without invitation. His grey eyes studied her with the intensity of someone cataloguing evidence. "Ms. Chen, we need to discuss your situation." "My situation?" Sarah's voice came out sharper than intended. She looked between the 2 men, feeling trapped between past and present, between the life she'd built and the one she'd fled. "What exactly did Marcus tell you?" Hawkins pulled out a tablet, swiping to what looked like surveillance photos. Sarah's stomach clenched as she recognized herself in several images, entering her apartment building, walking to work, sitting in the park where she'd met Marcus just hours ago. "We've been monitoring Dmitry Volkov's activities for the past 8 months, Hawkins said. "Your name came up in some intercepted communications 3 weeks ago. We know he's been looking for you." The admission hit Sarah like a physical blow. 3 weeks. Dmitry had found her 3 weeks ago, and the FBI had known. While she'd been going about her daily routine, believing herself safe, both her enemies and supposed protectors had been watching her every move. "You used me as bait," she whispered. the realization dawning with horrible clarity. Marcus leaned forward, his expression urgent. It wasn't like that, Sarah. We needed solid evidence of his trafficking operation, something that would stick in court. When we learned he was actively searching for you, you saw an opportunity. Sarah's laugh held no humor. Let me guess. You figured if you watched me long enough, Dmitri would eventually surface to collect his prize. Hawkins didn't deny it. Miss Chen, you're one of the few people who can testify about the inner workings of his organization. Your testimony could help us dismantle a network that's destroyed countless lives. And if I refuse? Sarah already knew the answer, but she needed to hear it spoken aloud. Then you're on your own against a man with unlimited resources and a very long memory, Hawkins said matter-of-factly. We can't force you to cooperate, but we also can't protect someone who won't help us protect others. Sarah felt the familiar weight of impossible choices pressing down on her shoulders. The same crushing sensation she'd experienced 2 years ago when she'd first decided to run. Stay and fight, risking everything for the slim chance of justice, or disappear again into a life built on false identities and constant fear. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, and Sarah realized her choice had already been made the moment she decided to keep this pregnancy. She couldn't run forever, not with a child depending on her, but she also couldn't trust these men who'd been manipulating her situation from the shadows. I need guarantees, she said finally. Real protection, not just promises. And I want to know exactly what you're asking me to do. Hawkins nodded, as if he'd expected this response. There's a grand jury hearing scheduled for next month. If we can get Dmitri to make contact with you before then, we can add kidnapping and conspiracy charges to the existing indictment. Make contact, Sarah repeated slowly. You mean you want me to be the worm on the hook? Marcus reached across the table, his fingers nearly touching hers before she pulled back. Sarah, I know how this looks, but it's the only way to end this permanently. Otherwise, you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky like a warning. The rain had stopped, but Maya couldn't shake the chill that had settled deep in her bones. She sat in the passenger seat of Jake's truck, watching the familiar landscape of her childhood blur past the window. Every mile brought them closer to the one place she'd sworn she'd never return to. Her father's old cabin in the mountains. You don't have to do this, Jake said quietly, his hands steady on the steering wheel. We can find another way. Maya pressed her palm against her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements. No, we can't. Not with Vincent's resources. He has people everywhere now. Her voice caught slightly. I should have told you about the pregnancy when I first saw you. Why didn't you? The question hung between them like a loaded weapon. Maya turned to study his profile, the strong jaw she'd once traced with her fingertips, the scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident she'd witnessed. Everything about him was achingly familiar, yet 5 years had carved new lines around his eyes, a hardness that hadn't been there before. Because I knew you'd do exactly what you're doing now, she whispered. Drop everything to protect me. And I couldn't ask that of you, not after what I put you through. Jake's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. You mean after Vincent's men shot me and left me for dead? After you disappeared without a trace while I was in the hospital? That's what you put me through? The bitterness in his voice was like a physical blow. Maya closed her eyes, remembering the hospital room she'd never entered, the flowers she'd left at the nurse's station because she was too afraid to face him. Vincent had made it clear, stay away from Jake Callahan or watch him die slowly. He said he'd kill you if I ever contacted you again. Said the shooting was just a warning. Her voice was barely audible. I had no choice. There's always a choice, Maya. You just didn't trust me enough to make it together. The truck hit a pothole, jarring her back to the present. Through the windshield, she could see the narrow dirt road that led to the cabin winding ahead. Her father had built it as a hunting retreat, but it had become her sanctuary during the turbulent years after her mother's death. Jake had found her there once before, when she was 17 and running from her father's drinking. He'd held her while she cried and promised her that someday she'd be free. Some promises were meant to be broken. "Vincent killed my father," she said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Made it look like an accident, but I know it was him. Dad had been asking questions about my disappearance, making noise. Vincent doesn't like noise." Jake's foot eased off the accelerator. "When?" "2 years ago. Car accident on a rainy night, just like this one." She laughed bitterly. "Vincent has a sick sense of poetry." They drove the rest of the way in silence, the weight of her revelations settling between them. Maya knew she was asking Jake to risk everything again, his career, his safety, possibly his life. The logical part of her mind screamed that she should have kept running, should have disappeared into another city, another identity. But logic had abandoned her the moment she'd felt her baby's first kick and realized she was utterly, completely alone. The cabin appeared through the trees like a ghost from another life, smaller than she remembered, with paint peeling from the weathered siding and weeds choking the front porch. But it was isolated, defensible, and most importantly, it held no digital footprint that Vincent's people could trace. Jake parked the truck behind the cabin, hidden from the main road. "How long do we have before he realizes you're gone?" "Maybe a day if we're lucky. I disabled the GPS in my car, but he'll figure it out eventually." Maya struggled with the door handle, her movements clumsy with exhaustion and pregnancy. Jake was beside her in an instant, his hand warm and steady on her elbow. "Easy," he murmured, and for a moment she was 17 again, scared and vulnerable and completely safe in his presence. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and memories. Maya moved through the familiar rooms while Jake checked the windows, his training evident in the way he surveyed potential entry points and sight lines. She found herself in her old bedroom, staring at faded posters of horses and half-read paperbacks scattered on the nightstand. "Maya." Jake's voice was sharp from the living room. "Come here. Now." She hurried to find him crouched beside the fireplace, his phone's flashlight illuminating something carved into the wooden mantel. Fresh wood shavings littered the hearth, and Maya's blood turned to ice as she read the message. "Welcome home, darling. Let's finish what we started." Vincent had found them first. The morning light filtered through the safe house windows as Elena sat at the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as she pulled on her jacket. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to disappear before Marcus could ask more questions she wasn't ready to answer. The baby kicked, as if sensing her distress, and she pressed a protective hand to her stomach. "You're leaving." Marcus's voice came from the doorway, not a question but a statement weighted with resignation. Elena didn't turn around. "It's better this way." "For who? You? The baby?" He stepped into the room, and she could feel his presence behind her like a physical force. "Or for me?" She finally faced him, noting the dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd slept as little as she had. "You don't understand what you're getting into." "Then explain it to me." His jaw tightened. "Because right now all I know is that someone tried to kill you last night, and you're acting like running away is going to solve everything." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken history. Elena had spent 3 years perfecting the art of disappearing, of becoming someone new whenever the past threatened to catch up. But standing here looking at Marcus, older now, harder around the edges, but still the man who had once made her believe in forever, she felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "His name is Viktor Kozlov," she said quietly. "Russian. Connected to organizations that don't officially exist." Her voice grew steadier as she continued, as if saying it aloud was somehow liberating. "I worked for him, Marcus, not by choice, but that distinction doesn't matter to him." Marcus's expression didn't change, but she saw his hands clench slightly at his sides. "What kind of work?" "The kind that required me to become someone else entirely, to gain access to places, people, information." She laughed bitterly. "I was good at it, too good, and when I tried to leave, he wouldn't let you go. Men like Victor don't just let assets walk away, especially when those assets know enough to bring down half his operation." Elena moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the empty street below. I've been running for 3 years, new identity every few months, never staying anywhere too long. Until now. Marcus joined her at the window, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same one he'd worn all those years ago. What changed? Elena's hand moved instinctively to her belly. Everything changed. She met his eyes, seeing understanding dawn in them. I can't keep running forever. Not with a baby. Children need stability, roots. They need protection. Marcus's voice was firm, decisive. From someone who knows how to fight back. You can't fight Viktor Kozlov with noble intentions and good training, Marcus. He has resources, connections, people in places you can't imagine. So do I. The quiet confidence in his voice made her look at him more closely. This wasn't the Marcus she'd known before, the idealistic agent who believed the system could fix everything. There was something darker now, more pragmatic. What happened to you? She asked softly. His smile was sharp-edged. The same thing that happened to you. I learned that the world isn't divided into good guys and bad guys. There are just people trying to survive and people trying to control them. A car door slammed somewhere outside and both of them tensed. Marcus moved to another window while Elena grabbed the bag she'd packed. False alarm, he said after a moment. Just a neighbor. But the interruption had broken the spell of their conversation. Elena hefted her bag over her shoulder, the weight of it familiar and comforting. This isn't your fight, she said. Yes, it is. Marcus turned from the window, his expression intense. It became my fight the moment you walked back into my life. I didn't walk back into your life. I stumbled into it by accident. Did you? He stepped closer, and she caught her breath. 3 years of running, Elena. 3 years of carefully chosen safe houses and new identities. And you just happened to end up in my city, at a location my team was monitoring? The implication hit her like a physical blow. Had she unconsciously sought him out? Had some part of her, tired and desperate and afraid, guided her here? It doesn't matter, she whispered. But even to her own ears, the protest sounded weak. It matters. His hand reached out, not quite touching her face, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of it. It matters because, for the first time in years, you're not alone in this. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what you need to finally stop running. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising another night of rain. Elena looked at Marcus, at this man who represented everything she'd thought she'd lost, and felt something shift inside her chest. The walls she'd built weren't crumbling anymore. They were dissolving entirely. And for the first time in 3 years, that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The safe house felt smaller, with Marcus pacing through it like a caged predator. Elena watched him from the kitchen doorway, noting how he checked every window twice, tested door locks, and positioned himself where he could see multiple exit routes. Old habits, she realized. Some things never changed. The perimeter's secure, he said without looking at her, but we can't stay here long. Victor's people are thorough. How thorough? She moved to the couch, grateful to sit. The baby had been restless all morning, pressing against her ribs like it sensed the tension crackling through the air. Marcus finally stopped pacing. Remember Prague? The banker who thought he could skim from Victor's accounts? Elena's blood chilled. She remembered the news reports, a family of 4 found weeks later. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to save you. His voice carried an edge she'd heard before, usually right before someone died. Victor doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget. The fact that you're pregnant won't matter to him. She pressed her hands to her belly, feeling the baby respond to her elevated heartbeat. This isn't just about the money, is it? Marcus sat across from her, and for a moment his carefully constructed mask slipped. She caught a glimpse of something raw, vulnerable. You really don't know, do you? Know what? Victor thinks the baby is mine. The words hit her like a physical blow. Elena stared at him, processing the implications. That's impossible. How could he? She stopped, remembering. Istanbul. The hotel security footage. Us going into your room together. Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair. Victor had me followed that night. He saw what he wanted to see. Elena's mind raced back to that evening, 18 months ago. The rain-soaked streets, the way Marcus had appeared at her hotel like a ghost from her past. They'd talked until dawn, two people caught between worlds, sharing secrets they'd never told anyone else. Nothing had happened. She'd been with David then, committed to building a normal life. But Victor wouldn't know that, so he thinks you betrayed him twice, personally and professionally, and that you're carrying evidence of that betrayal. Marcus leaned forward, his grey eyes intense. Which makes you the most dangerous person in his world. The baby kicked sharply, and Elena winced. Marcus noticed immediately, his expression shifting from calculated to concerned. Are you okay? Just tired. She tried to smile, but her body betrayed her. Another sharp pain, this one wrapping around her lower back. Not kicks, something else. Marcus was beside her in seconds. Elena? The pain intensified, and she doubled over. Something's wrong. He caught her as she started to fall, his strong arms steadying her. For a moment, she was 22 again, wounded and bleeding in a Moscow alley while he held her together with sheer will and medical tape. Breathe, he said, the same calm command he'd used that night. Tell me what you're feeling. Pain, pressure. She gripped his hand, fear overwhelming her practiced composure. It's too early. The baby is going to be fine. His voice carried absolute certainty, but she caught the tension in his jaw. We need to get you to a hospital. We can't. If Victor's people are watching, then we'll deal with them. Marcus was already moving, gathering their things with military efficiency. I know a place, private clinic, off the grid. Marcus. She caught his arm as another wave of pain hit. If something happens to me, promise me you'll... Nothing's going to happen. He lifted her easily, and she was struck by how right it felt to be in his arms again. How safe despite everything. I didn't find you again just to lose you. The words hung between them as he carried her to the car. Elena closed her eyes, fighting the pain and the memories threatening to surface. She'd spent 3 years building walls around her heart, convincing herself that what she'd felt for Marcus was just trauma bonding, shared danger creating false intimacy. But now, with his hands gentle on her face, and his voice promising protection he might not be able to deliver, those walls crumbled. The father, she whispered as he started the engine. David, he doesn't know about any of this. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Does he know about me? No. The admission felt like both a confession and a betrayal. I thought I was protecting him. You were protecting yourself. No judgment in his voice, just understanding. I would have done the same. As they drove through the city streets, Elena found herself studying his profile. The scar along his jaw was new, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. 3 years of whatever hell he'd been living. Why did you really come back? She asked. He glanced at her, and in that brief look, she saw everything he wasn't saying, everything they'd both been running from, because some things are worth dying for. The safe house felt smaller, with Marcus pacing its length like a caged predator. Elena watched him from the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. 3 days had passed since their confrontation, 3 days of careful politeness and loaded silences that stretched between them like tripwires. The contact should have called by now, Marcus muttered, checking his phone for the dozenth time that hour. His usually pristine appearance had started to fray around the edges, stubble shadowing his jaw, his shirt wrinkled from restless sleep on the couch. Elena's hand drifted to her belly, where their child continued to grow, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. Maybe Victor found out about the meeting. Marcus stopped pacing. Don't say that. We have to consider the possibility. She met his eyes, seeing her own fear reflected there. He has people everywhere, Marcus. You know that better than anyone. The accusation hung between them, unspoken but understood. You worked for him. You were one of those people. His phone buzzed, shattering the tension. Marcus answered before the first ring finished. "Reeves." Elena couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but she watched Marcus's face change, watched the color drain from his features as he listened. Her heart began to race. "When?" Marcus asked sharply. "How many?" A pause. "No, we can't wait. Move up the timeline." He ended the call and stood frozen for a moment, staring at the device in his hand as if it might offer different news if he looked long enough. "Marcus." Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. "What happened?" "They found the last safe house, the one in Portland." He looked up at her, and she saw something she'd never seen in Marcus Reeves before. Genuine fear. The whole family gone. The mug slipped from Elena's nerveless fingers, shattering against the floor in an explosion of ceramic and cold tea. Neither of them moved to clean it up. "How long do we have?" she whispered. "My contact thinks maybe 12 hours before they trace the network here. We need to leave now." Elena struggled to stand, her body feeling heavy and foreign. At 6 months pregnant, even simple movements had become complicated, but terror gave her strength. "Where can we go? If Victor's found the others—" "There's one option." Marcus was already moving, grabbing their hastily packed bags from the closet. "But you're not going to like it. I already don't like any of this." He paused, his back still to her. "We go to Victor directly. End this thing once and for all." "Absolutely not." The words exploded from her before she could stop them. "Marcus, are you insane? That's exactly what he wants. We'd be walking into a trap." "Would we?" Marcus turned around, and she saw calculation in his eyes now, the same look he used to get when they were younger, and he was working through a particularly complex problem. "Think about it, Elena. He's been hunting you for 8 months. All this time, all these resources, and for what? If he just wanted you dead, you'd be dead. He wants the baby." "Maybe, or maybe he wants something else entirely." Marcus moved closer, his voice dropping to the urgent tone she remembered from their shared past. "Victor Kozlov is many things, but he's not wasteful. Everything he does has a purpose. What if we've been looking at this all wrong?" Elena backed away from him, her hand instinctively moving to protect her belly. "You're talking about my child, our child. I won't use them as bait. What if we don't have to?" His eyes were bright now, animated by whatever plan was forming in his mind. "What if there's something Victor wants more than either of you?" "Like what?" "Like the man who's been feeding information to his enemies for the past 3 years. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She stared at Marcus, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time since he'd appeared in her life again. You're the leak. I've been building a case against him from the inside. Financial records, witness testimonies, locations of his operations. Everything the FBI needs to bring down his entire organization." Marcus's voice was steady, matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather rather than confessing to actions that could get them both killed. "But I need one more piece, something only Victor has access to." "So you want to walk into his stronghold and just ask for it?" Elena's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "This isn't some corporate negotiation, Marcus. This is Victor Kozlov. He kills people who look at him wrong. He won't kill me. Not immediately." Marcus shouldered both bags, his jaw set with determination. "Not when I have something he wants." "And what's that?" Marcus looked at her, and in his eyes she saw love and regret, and a terrible, unshakable resolve. "You." The rain hammered against the cabin windows as Elena paced the small living room, her hand instinctively moving to her growing belly. 3 days had passed since Marcus had left to gather intelligence on Victor's movements, and the silence was eating her alive. Every creak of the old wooden structure made her jump. Every shadow beyond the glass seemed to hide a threat. She'd tried to rest, tried to focus on the life growing inside her, but her mind kept circling back to the kiss they'd shared before he left. The way his eyes had searched hers, looking for something she wasn't sure she could give. Trust, forgiveness, a future that seemed impossible when the past kept clawing its way back. The secure phone buzzed once. Elena lunged for it, her heart racing. "It's me!" Marcus's voice crackled through the static. "We need to talk. Are you safe? What did you find?" A pause. "Victor knows about the baby, Elena. He knows everything." The phone slipped from her numb fingers, clattering onto the wooden floor. She sank into the threadbare armchair, her world tilting dangerously. This was her worst nightmare, realized. The one thing she'd fought so desperately to keep hidden. "Elena? Elena, are you there?" She retrieved the phone with shaking hands. "How?" "Someone in witness protection leaked information. We're working on finding out who, but right now that's secondary. He's mobilizing his people. Intelligence suggests he's planning something big, and you're at the center of it. The cabin, compromised. You need to move, now." Elena was already standing, muscle memory taking over as she grabbed the emergency bag she'd kept packed since arriving. "Where do I go?" "There's an old church about 15 miles north of you, St. Mary's. I'm sending coordinates to your GPS. Get there and wait for me. Marcus, what if this is a trap? What if—" "Elena, listen to me." His voice cut through her panic, steady and sure. "I know you have every reason not to trust me. I know I failed you before. But I'm not going anywhere this time. Do you hear me? Whatever happens, we face it together." The line went dead. Elena stared at the phone for a precious second, then shoved it into her bag. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the door, then stopped. On the small table by the window sat the ultrasound photo from her last doctor's visit, the only picture she had of her child. As she reached for it, headlights swept across the cabin's front windows. Elena's blood turned to ice. Too soon. Marcus said he was sending coordinates, which meant he wasn't close. These lights belonged to someone else. She killed the cabin's lights and pressed herself against the wall, peering through a gap in the curtains. 2 black SUVs had pulled up, their engines still running. Men in dark clothing emerged, moving with military precision around the cabin's perimeter. Victor had found her. Elena grabbed the ultrasound and bolted for the back door, her emergency training kicking in. She'd memorized every exit route, every possible escape path during her first night here. The woods behind the cabin stretched for miles, and she knew them better than these men did. She slipped out into the rain just as the front door exploded inward. "Search everything," a voice barked from inside. She was here recently. Elena ran, her sneakers squelching in the mud as she navigated between the trees. Behind her, flashlight beams began sweeping the forest. Shouts echoed through the rain as they discovered her escape route. She had maybe a 5-minute head start. The GPS coordinates Marcus had sent were burned into her memory, north-northeast, following the ridgeline. But in the dark, with rain obscuring her vision and adrenaline clouding her judgment, every tree looked the same. A branch caught her jacket, spinning her around. She pulled free and kept running, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The baby seemed to sense her distress, tiny movements fluttering against her ribs like a reminder of everything she stood to lose. There, by the creek. The voices were closer now. Elena pushed harder, her legs burning as she climbed the steep hillside. Her lungs screamed for air, but she couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. At the crest of the ridge, she paused to orient herself. Through the rain and darkness, she could make out the shape of a steeple in the distance. St. Mary's, maybe 2 miles away. Footsteps crashed through the undergrowth behind her, gaining ground. Elena touched her belly one more time, whispering a promise to the child she carried, and disappeared into the storm. Behind her, Victor's men spread through the forest like a plague, but ahead lay the possibility of salvation. If she could just reach the church. If Marcus kept his word this time. If her past didn't finally catch up with her future before she had the chance to fight for both. The safe house felt smaller with Marcus pacing its perimeter like a caged wolf. Elena watched him check the windows for the 4th time in an hour, his movements sharp and economical. The afternoon light carved harsh angles across his face, emphasizing the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. a souvenir from their last job together, the one that had torn their world apart. "You're making me nervous," she said, one hand resting on her rounded belly where the baby had been unusually active since morning. He paused mid-stride, his dark eyes finding hers. "Good. Nervous keeps you alive." The words stung more than they should have. This was the Marcus she remembered, all sharp edges and calculated paranoia, but glimpses of something softer had surfaced during their 3 days together, moments when his guard slipped and she caught echoes of the man she'd once loved. Her phone buzzed against the coffee table. Unknown number. They both froze. "Don't answer it," Marcus said. But Elena was already reaching for the device, something cold settling in her stomach. The message was brief. "Nice house. Shame about the neighbors." Marcus was beside her instantly, reading over her shoulder. His face went stone cold. "Pack, now." "Marcus." "What?" "They found us." He was already moving, grabbing weapons from hidden compartments she hadn't even known existed. "Salvatore's people. They've been watching." Elena's hands shook as she stuffed clothes into a bag. "How? We were careful." "Not careful enough." His voice carried a weight of self-recrimination. "I should have moved us yesterday, should have trusted my instincts." A sharp pain shot through her abdomen, different from the baby's movements. Elena gasped, doubling over slightly. Marcus was at her side immediately, his hands surprisingly gentle on her shoulders. "What is it?" "I don't know. Just stress, maybe." But the pain lingered, a dull ache that made her stomach clench with more than fear. Marcus studied her face, and she saw the exact moment he made his decision. "Change of plans. We're not running." "What do you mean?" "Running means putting you and the baby at risk. You're 7 months pregnant, Elena. You can't keep doing this." His jaw tightened. "I'm ending this, tonight." "Marcus, no." She grabbed his arm, feeling the tension coiled in his muscles. "You can't go after Salvatore alone. It's suicide. I've been planning this for 2 years. I know his routines, his security, his weaknesses." His eyes burned with something dark and final. "He's expecting us to run. He won't expect an attack." Another pain hit her, stronger this time. Elena bit back a cry, but Marcus noticed immediately. "We need to get you to a hospital." "No hospitals. They'll be watching those too." She straightened, forcing herself to breathe through the discomfort. "I'm fine. But Marcus, please, don't do this. We can disappear. There are no places safe enough." His hands cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize she'd shed. "He'll never stop hunting you, never stop hunting our child." The words hung between them like a bridge finally built across 2 years of silence and regret. "Our child." The acknowledgement hit her harder than any physical pain. "You can't know that for certain," she whispered. "I ran the DNA myself. Twice." His voice was rough. "The timing fits. And looking at you now, carrying our baby." He pulled her closer. "I won't let him destroy our family the way he destroyed everything else." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his decision settling around them like a shroud. She'd spent months convincing herself she could protect this child alone, but Marcus was right. Salvatore would never stop. He saw her betrayal as a personal affront and her baby as leverage. "Then we do it together," she said quietly. "Elena, no, you're not." "I'm not helpless." She pulled back to meet his gaze. "I know Salvatore's operation better than anyone. You need me." Marcus shook his head. "I need you safe." "Safe is an illusion until he's dead." The words tasted bitter but true. "Besides, he won't expect me to come to him. Pregnant women don't typically launch offensive strikes." A ghost of a smile touched Marcus's lips. "You're not typical anything." Another contraction hit her, and this time she couldn't hide it. Marcus caught her as she swayed, his face pale with concern. "Hospital, now." "Marcus, this isn't negotiable." He was already reaching for his keys. "Salvatore can wait. Our baby can't." As he helped her toward the door, Elena felt time compressing around them like a closing fist. Whatever was happening with the pregnancy, whatever trap Salvatore was setting, whatever deadly game they were about to play, it all led to this moment. The three of them against the world, just as it had always been meant to be, even if none of them survived to see tomorrow. The safe house felt more like a prison with every passing hour. Sarah pressed her palm against the cold window, watching Marcus pace the perimeter outside with methodical precision. 3 days had crawled by since Victor's men had tracked them to the motel, and the walls seemed to close in tighter with each breath. Her phone buzzed against the wooden table, the sound sharp in the suffocating silence. Unknown number. Her blood turned to ice as she recognized the pattern, the same burner phone sequence Victor had used 2 years ago when she'd first tried to disappear. "Marcus," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. He was through the door before she'd finished saying his name, his eyes immediately finding the phone still buzzing insistently on the table. Without hesitation, he snatched it up and answered. "Volkov." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched Marcus's face transform, every muscle tensing as Victor's voice filtered through the speaker. Even from across the room, she could hear the cold amusement in her ex-husband's tone. "Still playing protector, I see. How noble of you, considering you're the reason she ran in the first place." Marcus's knuckles went white around the phone. "What do you want?" "What's mine? My wife, my child." Victor's laugh sent shivers down Sarah's spine. "Did you really think a few forged documents and a new name would be enough? I've been watching both of you longer than you realize." The blood drained from Sarah's face. If Victor had been watching, if he knew about Marcus, then he knew about their history. He knew about the night that had torn them apart and set everything in motion. "She's not your property anymore," Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. "The divorce papers were filed months ago. Papers are just paper, my friend. Marriage is blood, and blood always calls to blood." Victor's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "The Riverside warehouse, 1 hour. Come alone or I start eliminating everyone she's ever cared about, starting with that lovely nurse from the clinic who's been helping her with her prenatal appointments." The line went dead. Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank into the nearest chair, one hand instinctively moving to protect her belly. He knows about Rebecca. Oh God, Marcus, he knows about everyone. Marcus was already moving, checking his weapon, grabbing his jacket. "Call the FBI contact. Tell them to put Rebecca in protective custody immediately." "You can't go." Sarah stood on shaking legs, grabbing his arm. "It's a trap. You know it's a trap." "Course it's a trap." Marcus turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes that terrified her more than Victor's threats: acceptance. "But it's the only way to end this." "No." The word tore from her throat. "I won't lose you again. Not like this." For a moment his mask slipped, and she saw the man she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. The man who'd held her through thunderstorms and promised her a future filled with quiet mornings and laughter. The man who'd walked away to protect her from exactly this moment. "Sarah, listen to me." His hands cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Victor won't stop, not ever. But he wants me more than he wants to hurt you. My betrayal cost him everything, his operation, his reputation, his freedom for 2 years. This was always going to come down to him and me. Then we'll face it together." "No." His voice was steel. "You'll get in the car, drive to the federal safe house in Millbrook, and you'll stay there until this is over. And what if it's never over? What if you don't come back?" Her voice broke on the words. Marcus kissed her forehead, lingering as if he could memorize the moment. "Then you'll be the strongest mother that child could ask for. You'll give them the life we dreamed about, even if I can't be there to see it. Marcus, please, promise me." His eyes were fierce, desperate. "Promise me you'll protect our child." The words hit her like a physical blow. Our child. In all the chaos, all the running and hiding and fear, they'd never talked about what this baby meant to him. But she could see it now, written in every line of his face. The love, the fierce protectiveness, the dreams he was willing to die for. "I promise," she whispered. But I need you to promise me something too." He waited. "Promise me you'll come back. Promise me this isn't goodbye." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he kissed her, soft and desperate, and full of everything they'd never had the chance to say. "I promise, I'll try." He was gone before she could tell him that wasn't enough. The safe house felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness. Elena sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, watching the first pale threads of light creep through the reinforced windows. Marcus had been gone for 3 hours, 3 hours that felt like an eternity, while she waited for news about Victor's location. Her phone buzzed against the wooden surface, and she lunged for it with desperate fingers. "We found him." Marcus's voice was tight with controlled fury. "He's holed up in a warehouse complex on the east side. Elena, there's something else. He's not alone." Her blood turned to ice. "What do you mean?" "Intelligence suggests he has at least 6 men with him. This isn't just about finding you anymore. He's planning something bigger." Marcus paused, and she could hear vehicles in the background. "We're moving in now, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. No matter what happens, you stay put. You stay safe. For the baby." The line went dead before she could respond, leaving Elena staring at the silent phone. The baby kicked against her ribs as if sensing her distress, and she placed a protective hand over her stomach. The waiting was agony, worse than any physical pain Victor had ever inflicted. Minutes crawled by like hours. She paced the small living room, her mind conjuring every possible disaster. What if Victor had anticipated the raid? What if it was a trap? What if Marcus... The sound of tires screeching outside shattered her spiraling thoughts. Elena's heart hammered as she peered through the blinds, expecting to see Marcus's familiar SUV. Instead, a black sedan sat idling in the driveway, its engine running like a predator's purr. The front door exploded inward before she could reach the panic button Marcus had installed. Victor stood in the doorway like a spectre from her nightmares, his pale eyes scanning the room until they found her. Behind him, 2 men in dark clothing flanked the entrance. "Hello, Elena." His voice carried the same cultured accent that had once charmed her, now twisted into something cold and calculating. "You've led me quite a chase." She backed toward the kitchen, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. "How did you find me?" Victor stepped into the room with predatory grace, his expensive suit immaculate despite the early hour. "Did you really think your knight in shining armor was the only one with resources? I've been watching this place for hours, waiting for him to leave." His smile was razor-sharp, punctual man that Marcus Kane always was, even in Prague. The mention of Prague sent a chill through Elena's veins. "You knew him before?" "Oh, my dear, there's so much you don't know." Victor moved closer, and she could see the madness dancing behind his calculated composure. "Kane and I have a history that predates you by several years. He cost me a very lucrative operation once upon a time. Imagine my surprise when I discovered he'd taken such a personal interest in my former associate." Elena's back hit the kitchen counter, trapping her. The baby seemed to sense the danger, movements becoming agitated against her ribs. The warehouse... empty, of course, though I'm sure Kane and his team are having a wonderful time searching through abandoned shipping containers. Victor's laugh was like broken glass. "I do so enjoy irony." One of his men stepped forward, and Elena recognized the cruel set of his features. Dmitri, Victor's most loyal enforcer, the same man who had held her while Victor delivered his worst punishments. "The car is ready," Dmitri said in Russian, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. "Excellent." Victor smoothed his tie with deliberate care. "Elena, you're going to come with us quietly. Any resistance, and I'll ensure that your unborn child pays the price for your defiance." Elena's mind raced, searching for options, for weapons, for anything that might give her an advantage. The kitchen knives were too far away. The panic button was across the room. Her phone lay useless on the table where she'd left it. "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere your protector won't think to look. Somewhere we can have a proper conversation about the items you stole from me." Victor's eyes glittered with malevolent anticipation. "And about the child you're carrying." The way he said it made her skin crawl. There was something in his expression that spoke of plans beyond simple revenge, something that made her stomach churn with a fear deeper than any she'd known. "Move," Dmitri commanded, gesturing toward the door with a gun that had appeared in his hand like magic. Elena took a step forward, then another, her mind frantically searching for escape routes. As they reached the threshold, she caught sight of her reflection in the hallway mirror, hollow-eyed, pale, but still fighting, still protecting the life growing inside her. Whatever Victor had planned, whatever twisted game he was playing with Marcus, she wouldn't make it easy for him. She'd learned too much about survival to give up now. The morning air hit her face like a slap as Dmitri's hand closed around her arm, guiding her toward the waiting sedan and an uncertain fate. The warehouse smelled of rust and abandonment, moonlight filtering through broken windows to cast jagged shadows across the concrete floor. Maya pressed herself against the cold wall, one hand instinctively protecting her swollen belly while the other gripped the burner phone Jake had given her. Her heart hammered against her ribs as footsteps echoed somewhere in the darkness beyond. "I know you're here, Maya." Victor's voice carried across the empty space, smooth and patient as always. "Running was never your strong suit." She closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe slowly. Jake should have been here by now. The plan was simple. Draw Victor out, let Jake's team surround the building, end this nightmare once and for all. But something had gone wrong. The silence where backup should have been felt like a trap closing around her. "You've caused me considerable trouble," Victor continued, his accent thick with barely contained anger. 3 years of searching. Do you have any idea what that's cost me?" Maya's fingers found the small recording device in her pocket, the one Jake had insisted she wear. If she could get Victor talking, get him to confess to everything he'd done, maybe it would be enough. Maybe her baby could grow up free from this shadow. "I'm not the same person I was," she called out, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "That life is over." A laugh echoed through the warehouse, cold and humorless. "You think carrying another man's child changes what you are, what you know?" His footsteps grew closer, measured and deliberate. "You were mine, Maya. You'll always be mine." She moved carefully along the wall, feeling for the service door Jake had shown her during their reconnaissance. Her fingers brushed against metal, and she nearly sobbed with relief. But as she reached for the handle, a figure stepped out of the shadows directly in front of her. Not Victor, someone else entirely, a woman with sharp features and dead eyes that Maya recognized with a jolt of terror. Katya, Victor's enforcer, the one who'd put 2 bullets in Danny Reeves for skimming money from the club. "Hello, little rabbit," Katya said softly, raising a gun with practiced ease. "Time to come home." Maya's mind raced. The recording device was still running. Victor needed to be close enough for it to pick up his voice clearly. She had to keep them talking, had to buy time for Jake to arrive with his team. "Where is he?" Maya asked, backing away slowly. "Victor's too much of a coward to face me himself." Katya's smile was razor thin. "He's handling some unexpected visitors. Your boyfriend brought friends." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. If Victor had Jake, if something had happened to him because of her— "Don't worry," Katya continued, reading her expression. "He's alive. For now. Victor wants to discuss terms with him, father to father." "What does that mean?" "The child you're carrying. Victor has plans for it, a legacy to continue." Katya gestured with the gun toward the center of the warehouse. "Move." Maya's blood turned to ice. She'd known Victor was dangerous, had seen what he was capable of, but this, threatening her unborn child, was beyond anything she'd imagined. The protective fury that rose in her chest was so fierce it nearly took her breath away. "You're insane if you think I'll let him anywhere near my baby." "You won't have a choice." Katya's voice remained conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. "Victor's been very patient, but his patience has limits." As they walked deeper into the warehouse, Maya caught sight of movement in the shadows above. Someone was on the catwalk that ran along the upper level. Jake? Or more of Victor's people? The main floor opened up ahead of them, and Maya saw Victor standing beside a makeshift table, illuminated by a single work lamp. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, immaculately dressed despite the squalid surroundings, silver hair perfectly styled. But there was something different in his eyes now, something desperate and hungry that made her skin crawl. "My beautiful Maya," he said, spreading his arms wide. "You look radiant. Motherhood suits you." "Where's Jake?" she demanded. Victor tisked softly. "Straight to business. I always admired that about you." He nodded to someone behind her, and Maya heard the distinctive sound of a safety being disengaged. "He's safe, for now, but his continued well-being depends entirely on your cooperation. What do you want?" "What I've always wanted. You, your loyalty, your skills." His gaze dropped to her belly. "Your child." The recording device felt hot against her palm. She needed him to say more, to be specific about his crimes. But every second that passed was another second Jake might be in danger. "You killed Tommy Morrison," she said suddenly. "You had him thrown off that bridge because he tried to leave." Victor's smile widened. "Prove it." Above them, the shadow on the catwalk moved closer. The abandoned warehouse smelled of rust and decay, moonlight filtering through broken windows to cast jagged shadows across the concrete floor. Maya pressed herself against the cold metal wall, one hand protectively cradling her swollen belly while the other gripped the burner phone Marcus had given her. Her breath came in shallow puffs, visible in the frigid air. She'd been hiding here for 3 hours, waiting for his signal. The plan was simple, too simple, which made her stomach churn with anxiety that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. Marcus would draw Victor's men to the opposite side of the industrial district while she made her way to the extraction point where federal agents waited. Clean, efficient, safe, but Victor had never been predictable. The sound of footsteps echoed through the cavernous space, deliberate and unhurried. Maya's blood turned to ice. Those weren't Marcus's footsteps. She knew the rhythm of his walk like a song she couldn't forget. These steps belonged to someone who wanted to be heard. "Maya, darling." Victor's accented voice drifted through the shadows, cultured and calm as always. "Did you really think it would be so easy?" She closed her eyes, fighting the wave of terror that threatened to overwhelm her. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her distress. She couldn't run, not in her condition, not without making noise that would give away her position immediately. "I must admit, I'm disappointed," Victor continued, his footsteps growing closer. "After all we meant to each other, you chose to run rather than trust me with the truth. Did you think I wouldn't find out about the child?" Maya's hand tightened on her belly. How could he know? She'd been so careful, had barely started showing when she fled Chicago 6 months ago. "Unless Marcus told me everything during our conversation this evening." The words hit her like physical blows. No, Marcus wouldn't betray her, not after everything they'd been through, not after the promises he'd made just hours ago, but the doubt crept in like poison, reminding her that she'd trusted him once before and paid the price. "He was quite cooperative once I explained the situation," Victor said, closer now, maybe 30 feet away. "Amazing how persuasive a few broken bones can be." Maya bit her lip to keep from crying out. If Victor had hurt Marcus, if he was lying somewhere bleeding because of her... "But don't worry, my dear. He served his purpose, led my men exactly where I needed them to go while I came for you myself." Victor's laugh was soft, almost fond. He always was too noble for his own good. "Still trying to save you, even as I put a bullet in his chest." The phone in her hand buzzed once, Marcus's signal that the coast was clear. Either he was still alive and unaware that Victor had found her, or Victor was playing games. Both possibilities terrified her. A beam of light suddenly cut through the darkness, sweeping systematically across the warehouse floor. Victor's men, moving in from multiple directions. She was trapped. "You've led me on quite a chase," Victor called out, his voice now coming from directly ahead of her hiding spot. 6 months of searching, of tracking down every lead, every contact. "Do you have any idea how much you've cost me?" Maya pressed harder against the wall, as if she could somehow disappear into the metal. The baby kicked again, and she placed both hands over her belly, whispering a silent apology. She'd tried so hard to protect them both, but it hadn't been enough. "I know you're here, Maya. My men have the building surrounded, but I'm willing to be reasonable." Victor's tone shifted, becoming almost gentle. "The child is mine, isn't it? The timing works perfectly." Her breath caught. The baby wasn't Victor's, she was certain of that. But if he believed it was, if that's what kept him from killing her outright, "Come out, and we can discuss this like civilized people. The baby will want for nothing. The best schools, the finest clothes, every advantage my money can buy. And you," his voice hardened, "you'll learn to be grateful for my forgiveness." The flashlight beam swept closer, and Maya knew she was out of time. She could try to run, hope that her knowledge of the warehouse layout would give her an advantage. She could surrender and gamble that maternal feelings might make Victor hesitate to hurt her, or she could trust that Marcus was still alive, still fighting, still coming for her. The phone buzzed twice in quick succession, the abort signal. Either Marcus was warning her, or Victor's men had taken his phone. Maya closed her eyes and made her choice. She stepped out of the shadows, hands raised, gambling everything on the hope that love could somehow triumph over the darkness that had been chasing her for so long. "Hello, Victor," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We need to talk." The warehouse erupted into chaos as Marcus's men spread out, their footsteps echoing against concrete walls. Sarah pressed herself deeper into the shadows behind the industrial equipment, one hand clutched protectively over her belly, the other gripping the burner phone Jake had given her. Her heart hammered so violently she was certain they could hear it. "She's here somewhere," Marcus's voice carried across the space, cold and methodical. "The tracker on her car puts her within a 3-block radius, and this is the only building showing signs of recent activity." Sarah closed her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. After everything they'd been through, after finally allowing herself to hope again, it was ending exactly as she'd feared it would. She thought of Jake, somewhere out there trying to find her, and wondered if she'd ever see his face again. A beam of light swept past her hiding spot, missing her by inches. She held her breath, pressing herself against the cold metal until the footsteps moved away. Through the gaps in the machinery, she could see Marcus directing his search with the same calculating precision she remembered from their marriage. He'd always been patient when hunting something he wanted. "Check the upper levels," he ordered. "And remember, I want her alive. She's carrying my heir." The possessive way he spoke about her child made Sarah's skin crawl. She'd spent months running from this moment, but now that it was here, she felt a strange clarity settling over her. She wouldn't let him take her baby, not without a fight. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Stay hidden. Coming for you." 3 simple words that somehow made her feel less alone in the darkness. She typed back quickly, "Warehouse District. Pier 17. Armed men. Be careful." The sound of boots on metal stairs made her look up. 2 of Marcus's men were climbing to the catwalk above her position. Soon they'd have a clear view of her hiding spot. She needed to move, but every direction seemed blocked by searching flashlight beams. Then she remembered the maintenance tunnels Jake had mentioned during their planning sessions. If she could reach the far wall without being seen, there might be a way out through the old storm drainage system. Sarah waited for the nearest guard to turn his back, then crept from shadow to shadow, using the massive equipment as cover. Her pregnancy made her movements awkward, and she had to stop frequently to catch her breath. The baby seemed to sense her distress, kicking restlessly against her ribs. "Movement in Sector 3, a voice called out, closer than she'd expected. Sarah froze behind a rusted conveyor belt, her pulse racing. The footsteps were getting closer, and she could see the glow of a flashlight approaching her position. She looked around desperately for another hiding spot, but there was nowhere to go. The light rounded the corner, and she found herself staring into the surprised face of one of Marcus's men. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he opened his mouth to shout. Sarah grabbed a piece of loose pipe from the floor and swung it with desperate strength. The metal connected with his temple, and he dropped like a stone, his flashlight clattering away into the darkness. "Johnson?" "Report." Marcus's voice crackled through the fallen man's radio. Sarah grabbed the radio and the man's gun, her hands shaking as she tried to figure out her next move. She'd bought herself time, but not much. Soon they'd come. The warehouse erupted into chaos as Marcus's men stormed through the entrance, their tactical gear and weapons gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Elena pressed herself against the cold concrete pillar, her hand instinctively protecting her belly as gunfire echoed through the cavernous space. "Stay down!" Kai shouted, returning fire from behind an overturned shipping crate. His years of military training kicked in, every movement calculated and precise. "Elena, when I give the signal, you run for the back exit. I'm not leaving you again," she called back, her voice barely audible over the sound of bullets ricocheting off metal. Marcus's voice boomed across the warehouse, amplified by some kind of speaker system. "This is touching, really. The star-crossed lovers reunited at last. But you have something that belongs to me, Elena, and I intend to collect." Kai caught Elena's eye and saw the terror there, not just for herself, but for their unborn child. The weight of that responsibility hit him like a physical blow. He'd failed to protect her once before. He wouldn't make that mistake again. "The drive," Elena whispered urgently. "He thinks I still have the drive with all his financial records. If I give it to him, he'll kill us both," Kai finished grimly. "Men like Marcus don't leave loose ends." A new volley of gunfire forced them deeper into cover. Elena winced as a sharp pain shot through her abdomen, the stress and adrenaline taking their toll. She couldn't let Kai see how much she was struggling, not when he needed to focus on keeping them alive. "There's another way," she said, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. "Before I ran, I made copies, sent them to 3 different journalists, 3 different law enforcement agencies. Dead man's switch. If I don't check in every 72 hours, everything goes public automatically." Kai stared at her in amazement. "You've been protecting that information all this time?" "It was the only leverage I had, the only thing keeping me alive." Elena's voice broke slightly. "But Marcus doesn't know the files have already been released. I triggered the release this morning when I realized he'd found me. Then we just need to survive long enough for the cavalry to arrive," Kai said, checking his ammunition. They were running low, and Marcus's team had them significantly outnumbered. "About that," Elena said, pointing toward the warehouse windows. Red and blue lights were beginning to flash in the distance, growing brighter and closer with each passing second. "I may have also called in some backup before we got here." Despite everything, Kai found himself grinning, always thinking 3 steps ahead. "I learned from the best," she replied, and for a moment the years of separation fell away. They were partners again, the way they'd always been meant to be. Marcus's voice cut through the momentary reprieve. "Bring me the woman. Kill the soldier." More tactical gear appeared from different angles. They were being surrounded. Kai made a split-second decision, knowing it might be his last chance to tell her what he should have said years ago. "Elena," he said urgently, "I need you to know, I never stopped looking for you, never stopped loving you. When I found out about the baby—" "Kai, don't." Tears streamed down her face. "Save it for when we get out of here. If we don't make it, we will." Her voice was fierce, determined. "This child is going to know their father. I've already lost too many years with you." The sirens were getting louder now, and they could hear shouting from outside the warehouse. Marcus's operation was about to become a very public disaster, and everyone in the building knew it. "Burn it down!" Marcus screamed, his careful composure finally cracking. "If I can't have what I want, nobody gets anything." The acrid smell of smoke began to fill the air as Marcus's men set fire to evidence and anything else that would ignite. The warehouse was old, filled with decades of oil stains and combustible materials. It would go up fast. Now we really need to move, Kai said, grabbing Elena's hand. They made a desperate dash toward the rear of the building as flames began to lick up the walls behind them. Elena stumbled, another sharp pain doubling her over, but Kai's strong arm kept her upright and moving. The back exit was blocked. Two of Marcus's men stood guard, automatic weapons trained on the door. They were trapped between the advancing fire and armed killers, with nowhere left to run. That's when the warehouse's main doors exploded inward, and Elena heard the most beautiful sound in the world. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" But Marcus wasn't finished. Through the smoke and chaos, Elena saw him raise his gun, his face twisted with rage and desperation. The barrel was pointed directly at her. Time slowed as Kai threw himself forward, and Elena realized that sometimes loving someone means being willing to die for them, and sometimes it means being willing to kill. The warehouse fell silent, except for the distant wail of sirens growing closer. Elena pressed her back against the cold concrete wall, Marcus's blood seeping through her fingers as she applied pressure to his shoulder wound. His breathing was shallow but steady, and his eyes never left her face. "The police will want statements," he whispered, wincing as she adjusted the makeshift bandage torn from her shirt. "We need to get our story straight." Elena shook her head, tears cutting tracks through the grime on her cheeks. "There is no story, Marcus. Victor's dead. It's over." She touched her belly protectively. "It's finally over." But even as she said the words, she knew it wasn't that simple. Nothing ever was with their past. The life she'd built in Portland, the identity she'd carefully constructed, all of it would unravel now. Sarah Chen would cease to exist, and Elena Vasquez would have to emerge from the shadows she'd hidden in for 3 years. Marcus struggled to sit up straighter against the wall. "Listen to me. Victor might be dead, but his organization isn't. There will be questions, investigations. You can't disappear again." The sirens were louder now, maybe 2 blocks away. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the baby move restlessly inside her, as if sensing her distress. When she opened them again, Marcus was studying her with that intense focus she remembered so well. "I never stopped looking for you," he said quietly, "even when I told myself I should, even when staying away would have been safer for both of us. Marcus." "No, let me say this." His hand found hers, warm despite everything they'd just endured. "I know why you ran. I know you thought you were protecting me. But Elena, you were never the danger. You were the only thing that made sense in my world." Red and blue lights flickered through the grimy windows now, casting fractured patterns across the warehouse floor. Elena could hear car doors slamming, voices shouting orders. In minutes, this space would be crawling with cops and paramedics and crime scene investigators. The careful anonymity she'd maintained would be shattered. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. 8 months. The baby. She's not Victor's. Marcus went very still. She watched understanding dawn in his dark eyes, followed quickly by something that looked like wonder and terror combined. "How long have you known?" His voice was barely audible. "Since I saw you at the coffee shop." Elena's laugh was shaky. "I did the math. It was our last night together, before everything went to hell." The warehouse door burst open with a thunderous crash. Flashlight beams swept the space as tactical officers poured through, weapons drawn, shouting for them to show their hands. Elena raised her arms slowly, Marcus doing the same despite his injury. "2 civilians here," one officer called out after spotting Victor's body. "1 wounded, 1 pregnant." The next hour passed in a blur of questions and medical examinations. Paramedics cleaned and bandaged Marcus's shoulder, while Elena submitted to a thorough check of the baby's condition. Both were pronounced stable, though the medic recommended Elena spend the night in the hospital for observation. Detective Ray Morrison, a weathered man with kind eyes, took their preliminary statements right there in the ambulance. Elena found herself telling a version of the truth, that Victor had been stalking her, that Marcus had tried to protect her, that Victor's death had been self-defense during a struggle for the gun. She left out the money laundering, the witness protection that never was, the 3 years of running, Those details could wait. Might never come up at all if she was lucky. As they loaded Marcus into one ambulance and prepared to take Elena to the hospital in another, he caught her hand. "This doesn't end here," he said firmly. "We figure this out together, all of it." Elena wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't understand the complications her presence brought into his life. But the baby chose that moment to kick hard against her ribs, and she realized she was tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of protecting everyone else at the expense of her own happiness. "Okay," she whispered, "together." The ambulance doors closed, separating them, but Elena felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't planning her next escape route. She wasn't calculating how quickly she could disappear. Instead, as Portland's lights blurred past the small windows, she found herself thinking about the future. About a little girl who would need a birth certificate with a real name. About a man who'd risked everything to find her. About the possibility that sometimes the very thing you're running from is exactly what you need to finally stop running. The baby settled quietly against her ribs, as if she too was ready to stop hiding and start living.